We're reading every Spider-Man ever, and this is Amazing Spider-Man issue 52. Spider-Man has been beaten by the Kingpin and is carried down into a cellar, followed by J Jonah Jameson, also the Kingpin's captive. They're both led into a room and manacled in the center, left to drown as water begins to flow in from a pipe and fill the room. Jonah screams for help, desperate to try and wake the unconscious Spider-Man. After being such a thorn in Jonah's side for so long, why does he choose this moment to be unable to help? Fortunately, Spidey starts to stir, and ignoring Jonah continuing to yell at him, he pulls himself free from the manacles with his spider strength. He then sets out to rescue them both by randomly spraying web everywhere? He's gone mad, Jonah thinks. Meanwhile and elsewhere, the Daily Bugle staff are discovering that Jonah is missing. Ned Leeds spots that Jonah's office door is broken and figures that he must have been abducted. He decides to hit the streets to investigate, leaving Robbie to hold down his desk and leaving Betty, his fiancée, worried that every man in her life will run into danger. And so back with Spider-Man, the last man in Betty's life who ran into danger, and his random web shooting is turning into a dome, which he's able to get over his head and Jonah's head just as the water rises up to drown them. Outside, the Kingpin's men are convinced that Spider-Man and Jonah are dead, but go inside to find the two of them encased in this webbing dome. Spider-Man leaps out, knocking all the men unconscious and freeing Jonah from his manacles. But Jonah is in shock. While Spider-Man fights off more of the Kingpin's minions, Jonah is frightened stiff, frozen on the spot. Spidey figures that there's only one way to get him moving again, and that's to shock him into escaping. And so he threatens Jonah with violence, and Jonah wakes up long enough to flee, and flees wildly enough that he crashes into some low-hanging piping and knocks himself out. Thinking that Jonah has actually escaped, Spidey heads up the stairs to face off against the main event, the Kingpin. And speaking of the Kingpin, he's in his office with Frederick Foswell, informing Foswell of Jonah and Spidey's fate. They're dead. But Foswell signed up to do crimes and to get rich, not do murders. And his questioning gets the Kingpin angry, yelling that Foswell is either a coward or an undercover agent, and both of those mean that he has to die. But lucky for Foswell, Spidey isn't dead, and he bursts into the office in that moment to save the day. But before any days can be saved, we jump across to the Silver Spoon Cafe, where Harry Osborn and Gwen Stacy are welcoming back Flash Thompson, on leave from the army. Flash brags about how important he is to the war effort, all jokey bravado, and then MJ arrives and the two flirt, while everyone wonders where Peter is. As soon as he shows up, they can organize a party for Flash. But Peter is too busy fighting the Kingpin as Spider-Man. He webs up the Kingpin's pin to avoid another gassing, and is prepared for the Kingpin's strength and speed this time. He's dodging, leaping to the ceiling, and hitting hard. As they fight, Foswell grabs a gun from the Kingpin's desk and flees. After Spidey manages to knock the Kingpin to the ground, the Kingpin also flees, escaping through a bookcase. When Spider-Man tries to follow, he's thrown back in an explosion of gas. But he's soon up and chasing the Kingpin down into the cellar. But also in the cellar is Jonah, woken up from unconsciousness by water dripping on his head, and he assumes it's blood. He runs wildly down a corridor until Foswell grabs him and pulls him to safety. Jonah was the only person who ever gave him a second chance, so Foswell owes him. But that price comes due immediately when two of the Kingpin's goons shoot at Jonah and Foswell leaps into the way. Spidey arrives at that very moment, knocking the two men together and knocking them out, but it's too late for Foswell. He dies in Jonah's arms. Outside, Spider-Man can't find the Kingpin. He must have made good his escape for now. Ned Leeds arrives just as they're wheeling Foswell out on a stretcher. Jonah tells him that he wants to do a front-page story about Foswell's noble sacrifice and how he died a hero. And then he wants to do another story about how much of a menace Spider-Man is, because you never know what side he's on. Sometimes he's helping you, sometimes he's threatening to kill you. And up on the rooftop, Spidey can't even bring himself to hate Jonah. While Jonah is a compulsive crank, Spidey is a compulsive do-gooder. That's just the way of things. But he does wish that being a do-gooder paid more. Thanks for watching. There's a new issue every Thursday, so while we wait for that, here's a fun fact about this one. Foswell was the first supporting cast member in Spider-Man to die, but definitely not the last. It's also in the letters pages of this issue, where we learn that a web shooter has to be tapped twice to fire a web, so that they don't accidentally go off every time that Spider-Man makes a fist.